I've been using technology as a part of my instructional technique for many years now, but it was only just a few years ago that I truly grasped the importance of how best to present the topic. Chapter 2 in the e-learning and the Science of Instruction book explains how people learn and the importance of understanding the science of learning. We like to think that we are experts in our field of endeavor and would like to pass on our knowledge to other students. We do this face-to-face many times using PowerPoint or some other presentation to aid in our explanations. With the advancement in technology, we can now use a plethora of multimedia in our presentations. In fact, PowerPoint comes loaded with this capability. And now that online learning is becoming ubiquitous as learning can be anytime, anywhere, it is even more important to understand the ramifications of using these bells and whistles that are at our disposal. I think we should take a step back and think of what it means to use multimedia. What did we do before PowerPoint? Yes, there was teaching that went on before PowerPoint became a part of our teaching life. So what did we do? Well, we were the multimedia presentation. We have all the nonverbal types of communication at our disposal. We can make our open gestures, pound our fist for effect, raise our voice for effect, or use that pause. But what happens when we turn on the projector to present our slides? Where's the presenter? Why do we need the presenter if we have a slide full of information that we can read for ourselves? Where did your attention go? It went from the presenter to the screen. So I want to explain how following just a few simple rules will make your presentations, whether face-to-face or online, much more effective. In fact, the research shows that if you do not use these techniques, you're actually inhibiting learning. We call these cognitive realities. So by using these cognitive realities, you will promote critical thinking with your students. There are two types of presentations that we normally make. So you have to know, what is the message? What are you trying to convey? Are you presenting information? Well, if that is the topic, I liken this to selecting brochures from a rack. You simply want to gain information. With this type of message development in your presentation, the presenter is there to explain and interpret the information. The slides usually have much text and charts and graphs. This type of information is hard to process, however. An example would be the meetings we might have periodically in our departments. It is important for us to be there with the leader of the organization, but it's not exactly for knowledge retention. You take away the communication experience with the leader and your cohorts, along with information you can refer to. The value is in the meeting itself and not exactly the presentation. There's one called cognitive guidance. This is the other type, and this is the one where learning is going to take place. So I liken this with using your presentation as a learning experience. This is where you guide your audience in the processing of the presented information. In this case, you want your audience to take in and process the information, put a value on it, compare it with prior learning, and then place it as a schema in memory. If this is the goal of the learning experience, and it should be, we should design our presentations that are consistent with how people learn. If we design our presentations that are meant for cognitive guidance, that is learning, yet design them for simply dissemination of information, such as in a communication meeting, we are doing a disservice to our students. We'll be studying more about the multimedia design principle, but it simply states people learn better from words and pictures than from words alone. But here's where you want to be careful. We process the written word and the spoken word through the same channel. So if I'm going to read a short phrase, I simply place it on the screen and read it verbatim. I might even read it again. Let's look at another way of representing the same message. People learn better from words and pictures than words alone. In this case, I do not have the text on the display, just a graphic that represents or reinforces what I will say. If I had repeated the text on the display and repeated the phrase, The channel that takes in the text and audio of the text would get jammed up. Let's look at the reasons for this. We take in and process information through all of our senses: sight, sound, touch, smell, taste. But what we have control of in our presentation is sight and sound. When you think of the multimedia design principle, this is what we're dealing with. This dual channel or dual coding theory states that there are two independent systems which deal with text and speech and graphics and information. There's a process called limited capacity theory. This is where we need to reduce the demands of the learner by not overloading either channel, such as repeating text and speech. People can only pay attention to a few pieces of information in each channel at the same time. Think about a news broadcast that has speech, movies, and the text scrolling across the bottom of the TV. Can you pay attention to all of these? Which can you remember? It's almost impossible to do this because we have a limited capacity for taking in and processing information. Something else we need to be familiar with is the concept of active processing. People understand the presented material when they pay attention to the relevant material, organize it into a coherent mental structure, integrate it with prior knowledge, and then finally place it in short-term memory. Let's actually see how this happens. Here's how the brain actively processes information and stores it away for future use. You have text and speech both trying to go through the verbal channel. All graphics and animation are going through the pictorial channel. Both are processed together to make a memorable impression where a new schema is produced. It is then integrated with prior knowledge, and if it is important to the individual, placed in a long-term memory. The power of this process is that it is done very quickly. And finally, you have what is called the coherence principle. Let's just look at what the coherence principle might be. You have all the bells and whistles happening at the same time. You might even have some flying text coming in. You might even animate that text. Are we getting annoyed yet? So we're going to be studying this coherence principle in depth later. However, I do want to mention it here. The only animation that I used in this presentation, except for this slide, in preparing, is the appear animation. This gives the presenter control of when the material is shown on the slide. The idea is to choreograph when and what you want your audience to see and hear. So what are the ramifications of these principles as we consider creating PowerPoint presentation for cognitive guidance? People learn better from words and pictures than from words alone. There are two independent systems that deal with text and speech and graphics and animation. This is called the dual channel process. And finally, people can only pay attention to a few pieces of information in each channel at a time. By keeping these concepts in mind, as well as the timing of our information when we develop presentations, our students are more apt to learn what we think is important. Anytime you create a presentation, you should have your citations included somewhere, either at the bottom of the graphic, which is probably not a good idea if you're thinking of the extraneous information. But you should keep some type of a bibliography somewhere in your presentation. So in this case, I'm including it at the end. So this is the book that I've used to gather information, but also all of the graphics that I have, and maybe some of the references as far as articles that I've read, I've included here on the reference page. So it's always important to cite your graphics and cite any information that you've used to gather the information for your presentation. Talk to you next time.